This tutorial concentrates on teaching how to properly size your petals and also gives you tips on what you can do to ensure that you are minimizing all of the real estate space available on your paper before you start cutting it. I'll be setting up my project to cut out a medium-sized poinsettia with one of my petals, and I want the end result to be a medium size. So to that end, I'm going to adjust my weight and my height. I'm sorry, my width and height. So I'm going to unlock it. I like to operate in a wholesome numbers. I'm going to set my width to 3.5, and I'm going to have my first petal at 6 inches. So that looks pretty tall, but maybe not very the width, I think it's not the best correlations. So I'm just going to go back up in here and adjust it, and I'll see what that looks like. That looks much better to me. Now I'm going to lock the size, and I still need my medium layer and I need my small layer. So what I'm going to be doing it is just duplicating the first one, which is essentially my large size. And now I will not be unlocking any my sizing. Instead, I'm going to adjust my height only, and I'll be reducing it by 1 inch. So I'm going to bring it down to 5 inches. And the width is going to change up automatically and proportionately. This is going to be my medium size. Now to get my small size, I'm just going to duplicate and reduce again by 1 inch, which brings me to 4 inches. And again, my width changes appropriately and relative to the height. The next part is setting it up the petals to cut it. If I allow the Cricut to set up the project for me, then it will not maximize all of the real estate space. It'll just put it however it puts it to cut the petals, which is not the best way for getting the most use out of your paper. And so with that in mind, you should always try to set up your projects manually. If I leave my petals this way, that's not the best way to maximize my paper, because you have a lot of this spots in between that you can't really do anything with. So even though this is staying within the constraint of 8.5 inches by 11 size paper that I'll be using, I just don't want to waste that much of a paper. So what I'm going to do instead is try to squeeze the petals as much as I can. So notice how now I'm still able to cut my petals, but the waste has been reduced quite a bit. Now I'm going to try to see how it's best to position this petal, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it. And now let's see. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me, but now I'm going to be just fine-tuning it and making sure that my petals are aligning quite a bit. One thing first I'm going to do is I'm going to flip. Actually, I'm not going to flip anything. I'm just going to leave it as is. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the 3 petals and I'm going to align it to on the top. The reason I'm doing it is because you can see that this petal is the highest and this other 2 are slightly below, right? So I'm going to just get it all up on the top. Now I can see that I still have quite a bit of inches to play with. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to attach it. The reason I'm attaching it is because I'm done with this 3 petals. I don't want them to be moved. I don't want them to get out of the position. Instead of attach, I could also have down a group, but I typically tend to like to do the attach. Now let's reduce my screen, because what I want to do is I want to bring in the square shape, and I'm gonna set it up to be the same size as my paper that I'll be printing. This is to give you the visual of what I mean by not wasting your real estate space. This is the size of the paper that I'll be printing on, right? If I take my project on this and I'm gonna rotate it this way. You can see, right, that there's quite a bit of the paper that is going to be wasted. And so to avoid that, I'm going to do the following. I'm going to bring another flower in and use that extra space to cut another flower. Now, you could theoretically, right, um, make a duplicate of a small petal and cut that one on this empty space. The problem with doing it is that I try to maximize my count when cutting the paper, and I planned this to be 3 layers at 5 petals each, and so really all I need to do is just cut this 5 times, and I will have all of my petals. If I make a copy of a small petal and I use the available real estate space to cut my small petal, my count will be off, right? And it's so much harder to keep a track of. And so I typically don't like doing this unless I can squeeze in all of the petals that I need for the flowers all at once, so that when it's cutting it, it's cutting the right number for me. Otherwise, the count is off and I have to keep a track that I have more small petals rather than large. I don't like doing that. So instead, I'm going to bring in a layered flower. I'm going to reduce it right here, size it up, and I can see that I still have enough space to go for the 11 inches, but not for the 8. So what I will be doing I will reduce this even further and move it out a little bit closer to the petals to see what's happening. And now I can see that I can actually expand it out a little bit, because if you noticed, I was showing it that now I have about 8.44 inches. That's a tad too big. I'm going to reduce it out. Okay, so that's looking pretty good to me. That is going to give me at least one cut for the layered flower. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to attach it again, because I don't want this to bend out of the order or a shape. And I'm going to come over here. I'm going to highlight my layered flower and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to bring it down in here and reduce it even more. Put it in as close as possible. I have a feeling that I probably will have to reduce it again. Actually, no, it's looking pretty good. This is giving me 8.44, which is starting to get a little bit close to 8.5. So just to be on the safe side, I'm going to reduce it a little bit more and move it out in here. If at this point you need to enlarge your screen, back to 75% to be able to see the lines, to make sure that you don't have petals overlapping on each other, go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'm going to once again measure it out, and it's looking quite good relative to what it was before. Just think about how much space we saved up, and you're now getting more flowers out of a single sheet of a paper. So I'm going to attach that one more time. Going to move it, and I'm going to try to see whether or not I can squeeze just one more flower. So again, I'm just highlighting my petal on the right hand side, on the left hand side. I'm duplicating it. I'm going to bring it down here, because remember, right, that I have my 8.26, going this way. but I can still get up to 11 inches going down that way. So that's why I'm trying to see whether or not I can bring in just one more flower. I'm just gonna highlight all of this, and look at that, guys. I can actually increase it if I like. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm gonna increase it, just make it a little bit bigger. That's looking pretty good to me. And I can see that I can make it a tad more bigger, which is exactly what I'm doing. Okay, now I'm gonna attach the whole thing. And here I have it. I have my real estate space, squeezed in as much as I can. If you're someone who's planning to do like paper bowls and whatnot, well, you have good 2 inches right here that you could put it in your filler petals easily into it. So now when I finish cutting it, right, I will have my 5 sheets that will give me one medium size individual petals flower, and then I'm going to get at least 4 layered flowers. What you can also do, if you're somebody who likes to reduce the size of the petal, is make a duplicate of this. I'm going to move this aside, and then you can come in here and you can detach it and detach again. Okay, and you can make this smaller. The reason to that is that this will serve as your large petal, and the next one will serve as your medium-sized petal, and then you have small ones. So that's just one more thing that you can do. Now notice that Cricut does not allow to print beyond 8 inches if you are working with 8.5 size paper. So to get around it is, you can see it as 8.5 inch by 11 is not available, right? Because what Cricut does, it doesn't align the paper directly at the seam of the mat, but it offsets by 0.5. So what you will need to do, what you need to remember to do is that when you put your paper on the mat, you need to move it slightly off by 0.5 inch to make sure that this size does not get cut off completely. Well, I hope you found it very useful. All the best.